She led digital communication at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Mark Zuckerberg's philanthropy, and has previously worked at
I'm so thrilled to be here, especially because this is definitely the coolest space I've ever presented in. I would love to hang out here all day. It's way more fun than like all the conference rooms and stuff that I'm usually in that are super boring. So what I'm going to do right now is just try to take everything that you guys have talked about and learned today and really apply some of that into practically how you can use those things to essentially spark social movements, contribute to existing social movements, and at the end of the day, just bring about social change for yourselves, for your communities, and all the causes that you care about. So if we want to, do I have a, there we go. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, see, I don't need a microphone. So who am I? You heard my bio, but who am I really? I'm Megan. I grew up in a working class town in South Carolina. I was a nerd. Are you surprised by this? Look at this face. I loved stories. I loved to read when I was younger. I got really into television and movies when I was in middle school and high school. I got into theater and all of the things that related to different types of storytelling. So much so that it inspired me to leave South Carolina where I grew up and go to college in Los Angeles because I wanted to work in the entertainment industry. And so I was out in LA. I graduated from USC. And I got my first job at Disney, actually at Disney Channel and then later ABC Family. And one of the things that I always loved about television in particular, and just visual storytelling through video, is just how much impact it can have on culture generally, and how the stories that we see and that we're exposed to can affect how we view the world and interact with the world. And that was something that really inspired my career. I spent basically the last 10 years working in leveraging storytelling to create social impact in the different ways that you're able to do that. As she mentioned, I'm currently at a digital agency called Whole Whale.
Jack, can you click it?
Oh, sorry. I got you. Just look over here.
No worries.
Keep you going.
So, that's supposed to say weapon, not pawn. But one of the things that I want to talk about is how you can really leverage your own stories and the unique experiences that you have as a weapon for change. Next slide. So as we've been talking about really all day, what stories have power. And each of your own individual stories have a ton of power for what you can do with those stories when you start to share them within your own communities, outside of those communities, and really bring fresh and new perspectives that can start to shift how people think about the world. So, as we talked about, stories can shape our worldview, they shape our outlooks, our actions, but also the reason that they're able to do that is because that we relate to stories. They can inspire us personally, they can change us, they can impact us, and they endure in our memories. And so up here I have 3 examples of stories that you guys probably know. Who's this first one? Trayvon Martin. And his story really helped cut through the clutter of what was happening to young black boys in this country. And it sparked a movement. And that movement continues to grow to this day. Does anyone recognize this girl in the middle? You probably don't know her name. That was a photo from the crisis at the border, the migrant crisis happening in this country. And that image of this small toddler crying, and you can't see here because it's cut off, but there are 2 adults there with badges, no family to be seen, really helped cut through the clutter and understanding what was actually happening at our border. Does anyone recognize this third woman? That's Christine Blasey Ford. She was the one that spoke out against Kavanaugh during the hearings to great personal risk of herself, but wanted to make sure that that story was heard. So how can you use your story in the same way that some of these stories have been used to change all of us, maybe in this room and beyond? So to start, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the actual key elements that go into a lot of these stories that do inspire movements and action and change. So does anyone know what some of these social impact stories have in common? I'm going to shout out anything you might have recognized across any themes that you see, any different stories across different areas. They all have a problem. Absolutely. They're all addressing a problem. Standing up for something they believe in. Yep.
They all spark change.
Sparking change. Yep.
They were all in pain.
Pain. Yes. Coming from a real, honest, vulnerable place. Revealing the truth. Absolutely. It's something that maybe it wasn't seen before or hidden, not for people that were experiencing those things, but maybe for the broader public. Anyone else? Yes.
They learn from their mistakes.
They learn from their mistakes, yep, and are able to use that as a way to move forward.
They all struggle with justice.
Yep. Yeah, addressing injustice. Injustice in general as a value, too, and something that needs to be upheld, and something that we can all relate to. Yes?
I was going to say a similar thing, like they're a catalyst for social justice.
Absolutely, a catalyst, something that sparks something bigger than itself. So there are, at the end of the day, there are essentially 6 key building blocks that go into a lot of these stories. And I'm going to break down what those are, because those are just 6 simple things that you can integrate into the way that you're telling your story to help push those things forward and inspire and spark that change that you seek. So the first is characters. This is you. It's who's at the center of the story. What is it about you personally and your experience that others need to see, that maybe, as you were saying, they haven't seen yet? What motivates, that's okay. What motivates or drives you? And what unique, not even necessarily unique, but what perspectives do you bring that can shed new light or new information on an idea? The next one is connection. And this is an interesting one. So I was recently had the opportunity to see Stacey Abrams speak. Does anyone know who Stacey Abrams is? The rightful governor of Georgia, whose election was stolen from her. And she's phenomenal. But one of the things that she said that I thought that really stood out for me, the advice that was given to her, is to remember that you need to meet people where they are, not where you want them to be. And so thinking about that and how you use your stories to bridge those connections. Like, what are the things that you have in common with other people? It can be a lot of the universal values, like justice that we were talking about, love, truth, humanity. We're all humans. You can tap into some of those basic things that are commonalities and bridge those connections that make people relate to your story and see beyond maybe the stereotypes or the perspectives that they had previously. The third one, my favorite one, the Christ Tunity. This actually, speaking of stories, is thanks to Homer Simpson. He makes a joke in The Simpsons about this. But what is a Christ Tunity? It's the inflection point between where you're addressing a crisis and how you're leveraging that crisis to create a greater opportunity. Does anyone recognize these kids in the background? Yeah. Parkland. They suffered a deep tragedy. And instead of drawing into themselves, they have leveraged and gone on to push through and use their story as a weapon for change. So when you think about the Christ Tunity, you want to sort of look at both things. You mentioned the problem that is inherent in all of these stories. So it's not only like what is the crisis or problem that you're trying to address, but how can you take that problem and flip it on its head and turn that problem into an opportunity for future change. And so this is essentially kind of the crux of the inflection point in a lot of these stories. Next one. Another one that's really tied to the Christ Tunity is choice. As individuals in a society, we are presented with an opportunity to make a decision and go one way or the other. And I love this image in the background, which again is speaking to the migrant crisis, but protect the children. We as Americans have an opportunity to either choose to protect and stop what's happening to those children or ignore it. And so it's putting that agency on the people that are receiving your story and understanding that we are essentially at a crossroads. And so what are the 2 different ways that what are the 2 different paths you can take, and what are the consequences of each of those individual paths? The 5th one is a call to action. And this one is often overlooked. This is one that you don't necessarily need a direct call to action to be able to influence someone with your story and make them feel something. But when you have a direct call to action, it can make a big difference. So we're going to do a quick game. Going to take 2 seconds. So when I say go, I want all of you in this room to raise the same hand in the air. Okay, ready? a left? Make sure. Okay. All right. Interesting. So that took a little bit. That was pretty quick. But what's interesting is the majority of the population are right-handed. And so what happened in that instance is when we said raise the same hand in the air, we all sort of molded to that majority rule, right? So now when I say go, I want everyone to raise their left hand in the air. Sorry, go. Thank you. Again, not clear with my communication. But you can see here how the difference between specific with your requests is. If you want people to see things differently, you have to tell them the things that you want and expect them to do. And so making sure that you have a clear call to action. This example that I have here, does anyone know the organization Races? They work on the border in Texas. And this fundraiser, do you guys see these numbers? $18 million. This was started by 2 people in the Bay Area, random people, like a couple living in the Bay Area, that they saw this crisis and they wanted to do something about it. And so they started a Facebook fundraiser, and for this organization that works literally on the ground at the border. And they were able to raise $18 million because they had a specific call to action. They wanted to impact this issue with this amount of money so that they could know that they were moving things forward with an organization that they trusted. So you want to be thinking about what are the specific things that people can do right now today to start moving the needle on those issues. Next one. And the last one is a hook. And this one's kind of annoying because I wish we lived in a world where anything that had merit cut through. But the reality is there's so much kind of competing for our attention out there. It can take a lot of time and energy for people to really pay attention to the issues that matter, and particularly the issues that matter to each of us. And so sometimes we need a little bit of a hook to cut through that clutter and gain people's attention. Do you guys recognize this gentleman? Colin Kapernick. Got a ton of shit for this. Oops. Yes. Got a ton of crap for this, but he stood up for what he believed in, and he did it in a way that he knew would be controversial, but he knew would make a difference and get attention for the issue that he cared about in a way that it wasn't getting enough attention at the time. And so you want to always be thinking about, not to use the term gimmick, but what are the different ways, the unique ways that you might be able to tell your story in a new or interesting way that might be able to cut through that clutter and get those eyeballs and do something that people aren't used to seeing that might surprise them, be a little bit more of that special element that makes a difference for folks. So these are the 6 building blocks of social impact stories. That's it. If you are able to incorporate these 6 things into your stories, you're going to be able to motivate and drive people to take the actions and start to address some of the challenges that you want them to address. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time kind of breaking up and talking through each of the ways that you might be able to draw out some of these elements into your own stories. But one other thing that I just want to touch on quickly is types. I think you've seen a little bit of diversity of those types of stories throughout the day. But if we go to the next slide, I want to put it out to the group. What are some different types of social impact stories? Like where are you seeing these types of stories? Sorry? Everywhere, but in what form? So I know we saw a video and TV show earlier. Yes?
Spoken word.
Spoken word, absolutely. Where else? Music. Podcast, yep. Right, what you said something. What was it? Never mind. Sorry to put you on the spot. What else? Yes. New media. Digital. Apps, yep. In person, just conversations. Great. Anywhere else? TV commercials, yep.
And books, still.
Books, absolutely. And so the reason I wanted to pose this question out to the group is because I don't want you guys to feel like you have to be confined to one type of storytelling in order to do this. You can do this work throughout any different medium of different types of storytelling. And if we go to the next slide, these are just some examples of a lot of what we were saying. But a simple Facebook post can be enough to be a story that can cut through. A book. Maybe you're doing a pitch for a TV show, a petition, a YouTube video. Mentioned podcast. Maybe you want to do a stand-up special. It's a great, you guys know Hassan Minaj? He's a great stand-up special where he kind of does this. Art, maybe you want performance art or just a painting and how to be able to share your story through those things. A play, music, even just a photo. And that's kind of what I wanted to show through the presentation today. There was no other audio medium in this, but each of those stories were so resonant of themselves that the images alone are enough to cut through and remind us of specific stories that have stuck with us. You can send an email, video blog, film, maybe writing an op-ed or a blog post for a medium that you like online, all different ways of doing this. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to use a little bit of time to reflect on how you might want to bring your own stories to life as a means to create change in the world. And so if we go to the next slide. I just said that. Next slide. And so what I have up here is kind of a fill in the blank. I would love for everyone to spend, let's say, 5 minutes doing quiet reflection on your own stories and thinking through each of the different elements and the questions that I talked about. And then the hope is that we'll be able to do today is to walk away with an idea for one way we can use our story to create change, and to be able to share that back with the representation project and be able to sort of have something tangible that comes out of the day that you guys have had here. Any questions on any of this before we break? All right, let's spend 5 minutes doing that, and then if you guys feel comfortable, we might have some folks come and share their stories when we come back.